Hi everybody, my name is Charlene Schwartzman and I am a high school math teacher. I've been teaching math for 21 years and I'm going to be doing a series of videos and hopefully you'll take an interest in them. The first place I would like to start is, why does all hell break loose when you divide by zero? You're always told that, like, oh, 4 divided by 0 is undefined, or 6 divided by 0 is undefined, but do you guys really understand why it's considered undefined? That's what I would like to show you today. So I'm going to start with talking about 0 and why I love 0 so much. 0 basically breaks all the rules in our number system. It's a big rule breaker, you know? Like, for example, if you start with addition, right? If I take a number like 4 and I add 7 to it, it's going to give me 11. If I take 4 and I add 3 to it, it's going to give me 7. If I take 4 and I add 6 to it, it's going to give me 10. So if I take any number, and if I even added it to itself, it's going to give me 8, right? So the interesting thing is that if I add anything to 4 other than 0, it's going to give me a new number, right? However, if I take 4 and I add it to 0, it's going to give me back a 4. And that should make sense because 0 represents nothing, right? So if I take nothing and I add it to 4, I should wind up with 4. Now, moreover, the beautiful thing is that the inverse operation of addition is subtraction. So that means then if I added 4 and 7 together to get 11, that means if I take 11 and subtract 7 from it, it should bring me back to 4. That's what we mean by inverse operations. So if I do that, it should do that. If I go over here and if I take 7, right, and I added 3 to get 7, that means I have to subtract 3 to get 4. I'm going backwards, right? I'm literally reversing what I did. So from here, I'm doing 10 minus 6 to give me 4. And then over here, I have 8 minus 4 is going to give me 4. And then finally, 4 minus 0 is going to give me 4. So the interesting thing is that the inverse operation of addition is subtraction, right? And if you look over here, whether I add a 0 or I subtract, that should be a 4 here, whether I subtract 0, it's going to give me right back where I started anyway. And it should make sense that if I add nothing, I wind up with what I started with. If I subtract nothing, I still end up with what I started with, which is super interesting. Okay, now let's get into multiplication. Let's talk about multiplication because we're going to work our merry way over to that division. Okay, so if I take 6 and I multiply it by 3, it's going to give me 18. If I take 4 and I multiply it by 8, it's going to give me 32, right? If I take 5 and I multiply it by 7, it's going to give me 35, right? All of these numbers, it's going to happen that way, right? And if I take, for example, let's say I take 6 and I multiply it times a half, it's going to give me 3, right? If I take 4 and I multiply it by a half, it's going to give me 2, and if I take 10 and I multiply it times 1/5, it's going to give me 2, right? So the cool thing is that these numbers, like if I multiply by a number larger than 1, I'm going to wind up with something bigger than what I started with. So 6 times 3 is 18. 18 is clearly bigger than 6. If I take 4 times 8, it's going to be 32, which is way bigger than 4, and so forth. If I come down here and I do 6 times a half, this number is less than 1, so I should wind up with something smaller than what I started with, right? And similarly over here, 4 times a half is giving me 2, and then the same thing, 10 times a fifth is giving me 2. So all of these numbers are smaller than 1, so these numbers here should be smaller than those numbers there, just because it just makes sense that I'm multiplying by something smaller. So now, if I go ahead and I say to us, okay, the rule is in our number system that if I take a number, like say 6 times 0, it's going to give me 0, right? And over here, if I do 5 times 0, it's going to give me 0. So any number times 0 is equal to 0. Okay, now let me go back to a new page. So let's go to that 6 times 3 is equal to, 6 times 13. 6 times 3 is equal to 18, right? Now we know that the inverse operation is division. So that means if I multiplied by 3 to get 18, that means I'd have to divide by 3 to get back to 6. So that's saying that 18 divided by 3 has got to bring me back to 6, which it does. If I take that 4 times 7 equals 28, right? that means that 28 divided by 7 has got to bring me back to 4, right? If I take now, so now I have that, right? So now let's get into some division stuff, right? Let's get into some division. So if I have like 24 divided by 6, that should equal 4. And that means then that 4 times 6 should bring me back to 24, right? If I take 12 and I divide it by 3, that's going to equal 4. So that means then my inverse operation, 4 times 3, should bring me back to 12. And sure enough, it does, right? Okay. Now, I'm just talking about going back and forth. So let's take, for example, 0 divided by 5, right? Let's think about what that means. I'm taking nothing and I'm dividing it 5 ways, right? And so I've got 5 people standing in front of me and I've got nothing in my hands and I distribute nothing. Everybody gets, that's right, they get nothing. So that means that if I invert this operation, 0 times 5 should bring me back to 0, and sure enough, it does, right? If I take 0 and I divide it by 10, I got 10 people staring at me, right? I have nothing and I distributed 10 ways. Everybody still gets nothing. So therefore, 0 times 10 is going to equal 0. And that all works. It's beautiful, okay? Now, you ready? Here's where it comes. Let's take 6 and divide by 0, okay? Okay. Think about this. You have to go backwards, right? We want to invert this operation. So let's call this number A, all right? If you want to do the inverse operation to get back to 6, you're saying to yourself, A times 0 has to get me back to 6. That's what this is saying. So you're asking yourself, what number, where this is any number you can possibly think of, times 0 is going to get you back to 6. Can you think of a number? Because I sure as heck can't. So that's why when you divide by 0, it doesn't work. There's no number in our number system that will ever satisfy that. Like, we can't divide by 0 because I can't get back to what I originally started with. So if I take 15 and I'm dividing it by 0, I have to find some number that when I multiply that number times 0, it's bringing me back to 15. There is no number in our number system where any number times 0 is going to get me back to 6, or any number times 0 here is going to get me back to 15. That is why we say it's undefined. It's just simply basically saying that there is no number, no such number. So no such number where we can make this happen. Okay? And that's where it comes from. This happened. I'm kind of butchering the way I'm writing this, but that's okay. So with that said, going back to this, right, typically you would be like, oh, 6 divided by 3 is equal to 2. So 2 times 3 is equal to 6. Oh, it's so harmonious, isn't it, right? Oh, it's just so delightful, yes? 42 divided by 7 is equal to 6. So therefore, 6 times 7 is equal to 42. It's harmonious. I feel like I'm singing a happy song. You're like, oh, everyone is so happy. 0 divided by 11 is equal to 0, because anything divided 11 ways, 0 divided 11 ways is still 0. Oh, so 0 times 11 is equal to 0, And then all of a sudden, so here we are, 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 42 divided by 7 is 6. 6 times 7 is 42. 0 divided by 11, 0. 0 times 11 is 0. And then all of a sudden we come to, 15 divided by 0 equals, and you're like, is there such a number? And even if you tried to guess a number, think of any number that you could possibly can. So I'm going to call this n, right? So that means n times 0 should give me 15, and if you're like, oh, 5, not a chance, because 5 times 0 is not 15. Oh, let's guess 7. Oh, 7 times 0 is not 15. Oh, guess 23. 23 times 0 is not 15. So therefore, there is no such number in our number system. And that's why mathematicians came up with this and basically said any number, okay, any number divided by 0 is undefined. When they say undefined, means that they can't find a number that'll do it. That's what it means. There is no number that they can find in our number system that will make this work. I hope this has helped you. I hope that it has helped you better understand why we cannot divide by 0. We can't divide by 0 because there is no number when I invert it that's going to get me back to where I started. Thank you.